Have you ever wondered what it would take to make someone like Elon Musk look poor? Not just richer than a modern billionaire in absolute dollars. That's a tricky game across centuries. I mean richer in the way that really matters in history. Rich enough to shape governments. Rich enough to decide who gets elected emperor. Rich enough to finance wars, control metals, influence the church, and make kings nervous. Because in Renaissance Europe there was a man who did exactly that. His name was Jakob Fugger. And if you've never heard of him, that actually makes his story even more fascinating. Because Fugger may be the most powerful rich man most people know nothing about. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Renaissance banker who made Elon Musk look poor. Not because he had rockets or electric cars, obviously, but because he had something even more important in his own age: leverage over the system itself. To understand Fugger, you have to forget the modern image of a billionaire for a moment. Today, when we think of ultra-rich people, we think of founders, tech companies, stock prices, social media, public brands, people who dominate headlines. In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, wealth looked different. There was no stock market in the modern sense, no venture capital, no Silicon Valley, no central banking system like the ones we know today. But there were empires, dynasties, wars, silver, copper, loans, monopolies, and a constant shortage of cash at the top of society. Kings looked powerful, but they were often broke. And when kings are broke, the person who finances them becomes very important. That was Jakob Fugger. He was born in 1459 in Augsburg, in what is now Germany, into a merchant family. The Fuggers were already prosperous, but Jakob didn't just inherit a business and maintain it. He scaled it. Massively. He took a successful family trading house and turned it into one of the most powerful financial operations in Europe. At first, the family business dealt in textiles. That was respectable, profitable merchant work. But Jakob had bigger ambitions. He understood something that a lot of powerful people throughout history have understood. If you want real influence, don't just sell goods. Finance the people who rule. That meant moving beyond trade into banking, mining, and political lending. And this is where the story becomes extraordinary. Fugger did not get rich by making nice products for a mass market. He got rich by inserting himself into the bloodstream of European power. He financed rulers. He lent to princes. He backed dynasties. He tied himself to the Habsburgs, the family that would become one of the most powerful ruling houses in Europe. And once he did that, his wealth stopped being ordinary merchant wealth. It became strategic wealth. One of the biggest reasons Fugger became so rich was metals. Not metaphorically, literally metals. Silver, copper, mining wealth. He secured major interests in the mines of Tyrol and Hungary, among other places. In an age when metal was money, war-making power, and industrial input all at once, controlling the supply of precious and useful metals was like controlling a huge chunk of the modern energy, banking, and defense sectors at the same time. Think about that. If you control the money metal, and the rulers need money, and the armies need weapons, and the state needs credit, then you are not just rich, You are central. This is one reason the Elon Musk comparison is useful, even if it's provocative. Modern billionaires often dominate important sectors. Fugger dominated the links between sectors. Mining led to money. Money led to loans. Loans led to political favor. Political favor led to monopolies. Monopolies led to more mining. And that cycle kept compounding. He was not just participating in the system, he was helping design it. Now, when people call Fugger one of the richest individuals in history, they're not saying he had more cash in a vault than every modern billionaire. Historical comparisons are messy, but relative to the size of the economy around him, Fugger's wealth may have been astonishingly large. Some estimates suggest that his fortune amounted to a significant share of Europe's economic output at the time. That is where the real comparison becomes shocking. A modern billionaire can be very rich and still just be one wealthy person inside an enormous global economy. Fugger's wealth, by contrast, was large enough relative to his world that it could bend the political landscape. And he did bend it. The greatest example is the imperial election of 1519. This is one of those moments that sounds almost too modern. The Holy Roman Empire needed a new emperor. The leading candidate was Charles of Habsburg, the future Charles V. But becoming emperor was not automatic. Powerful electors had to be persuaded, and persuasion in this context often meant money. A lot of money. Charles needed financing to secure support, and Jakob Fugger helped provide it. In effect, one of the most important political positions in Europe was influenced by massive private financing. That should sound familiar. The names are different. The clothes are different. The technology is different. But the logic is familiar. Political power is expensive. Wealthy backers gain influence. The line between public office and private money gets blurry. Fugger did not merely lend to a king after the fact. He helped make an emperor. That is a different level of rich. And once Charles V was on the throne, Fugger's influence deepened even further. This is one of the most revealing parts of the story. People often assume that rich men serve rulers, but sometimes rulers serve rich men too. Not openly, of course, not in a simple puppet master way. History is rarely that neat. But when a dynasty depends on your financing, your advice matters. Your access matters. Your commercial interests matter. And Fugger knew how to convert that into advantage. He received concessions. He secured privileges. He expanded his mining operations. He built a business empire that was tied directly to the fortunes of Europe's most powerful rulers. If this sounds less like ordinary banking and more like state capture, that's because the line between those things was often very thin. And Fugger did not seem especially troubled by that. In fact, one of the striking things about him is how unapologetic he appears to have been. There is a famous sentiment associated with him, whether quoted exactly or remembered in spirit, that he lent money to rulers because he expected profit, not because he was doing anyone favors. That matters. Fugger was not pretending to be a philanthropist. He was not dressing greed up as idealism. He understood finance as power, and he used it accordingly. But there's another side to the story, and this is where it gets even more interesting. Fugger's world was not just political, it was religious too. And in Renaissance Europe, religion was tied to money in all kinds of uncomfortable ways. The church needed revenue. Popes borrowed. Bishops borrowed. Great offices in the church were entangled with financial arrangements. One of the most controversial examples involved indulgences, the payments associated with remission of penalties for sin, and the financial structures around them. Fugger's banking network became involved in moving and managing church-related funds. This is important because it places him near one of the great turning points in European history, the Reformation. Martin Luther's attack on indulgences in 1517 was not just a theological explosion. It was also, in part, an explosion against a religious financial machine that many people felt had become corrupt. Fugger did not cause the Reformation by himself, obviously, but he was part of the financial world that helped make the late medieval church look increasingly like a wealthy institution entangled in debt, revenue extraction, and elite deal-making. Again, this is why he feels so modern. His money did not just shape business. It touched politics, religion, public legitimacy, and the structure of power itself. That is what happens when finance gets big enough. Now, let's talk about scale. Because Fugger was not just lending here and there. He was building a multinational enterprise before most people would have had words like multinational enterprise. He had agents across Europe. He moved money across borders. He tracked debts, obligations, shipments, and contracts over vast distances. He operated in a world without instant communication, without spreadsheets, without phones, without modern accounting software. And yet he built a machine of information and capital that linked mines, courts, churches, and trading centers across the continent. That is a staggering organizational achievement. In some ways, this is what makes him more impressive than many flashy modern billionaires. He built complexity in a world that fought complexity every step of the way. Messages traveled slowly. Governments were unstable. Wars could upend routes overnight. Rulers defaulted. Local privileges changed. Disease spread. Yet, through all of that, Fugger created a network resilient enough to keep making him richer. This is where the title of the episode really comes alive. Did Jacob Fugger literally make Elon Musk poor? Of course not. But relative to his own age, Fugger may have stood closer to the center of economic and political power than almost any modern billionaire stands today. A billionaire now can influence governments, markets, and public debate. Fugger helped choose emperors. That is a different category. He didn't just buy platforms, he bought access to sovereignty. And like many people who get very good at making money, he understood that wealth was most useful when it stopped being just wealth and turned into insulation. Influence protects profit. Political favor protects monopoly. Elite status protects influence. So, Fugger did what many successful dynasts do. He converted commercial success into social permanence. He bought land, he improved family prestige. He helped establish the Fuggers not just as rich merchants, but as a lasting elite house. This is another timeless lesson. New money rarely wants to stay new money. It wants to become old money. It wants respectability. It wants titles, buildings, legacy, and institutions that make the fortune feel permanent. Fugger understood that too. And yet, for all his brilliance, there is something darker in this story. Because fortunes on this scale are rarely clean. Fugger's wealth depended on monopolies, political favoritism, hard bargaining, and systems of extraction. He thrived in a world where ordinary people did not have access to the same protections or opportunities. His deals with rulers often reinforced structures of inequality and concentrated power, rather than opening markets more fairly. In that sense, he was not the heroic entrepreneur of modern business mythology. He was something older and more honest. A power broker, a banker in the original, harder sense. Someone who understood that if you can control credit in a cash-starved political order, you can make yourself indispensable to people who officially outrank you. And that may be the deepest lesson of his life. Titles matter. Crowns matter. Armies matter. But whoever finances them has a claim on the future, too. That was true in Renaissance Europe, and it has never completely stopped being true. Governments may look sovereign. They may speak in the language of destiny, patriotism, faith, or empire. But governments also have bills, and whoever helps them pay those bills acquires leverage. Jacob Fugger mastered that leverage better than almost anyone in European history. So, why don't more people know his name? Partly because financiers are often less glamorous than conquerors. A king in armor makes for better paintings than a banker with ledgers. A battlefield looks more dramatic than a contract. But in history, the contract often matters just as much as the battle. Sometimes more. Because the battle cannot even happen if somebody doesn't fund it. And Fugger funded a lot. He funded rulers who shaped Europe. He financed operations that affected the balance of dynastic power. He profited from metals that mattered to the entire system. He became so rich that later generations remembered him with a simple nickname, Jacob Fugger the Rich. That is the kind of title you get when your fortune becomes the thing people mention first. Not your bravery, not your piety, not your genius, your wealth. And in his case, the title fit. So what should we take from his story? First, that finance has been political for a very long time. Second, that some of the most powerful people in history were not monarchs or generals, but the men standing behind them with the money. Third, that relative wealth matters more than flashy nominal comparisons. Fugger is not interesting because we can turn his fortune into a modern dollar figure and make a viral chart. He's interesting because he may have been richer, in terms of influence, than many of today's billionaires are. He had fewer toys, but more leverage. And finally, his life reminds us that the real summit of wealth is not consumption. It is control. The ability to decide what gets financed, who gets rescued, which projects survive, which rulers stand, and which ambitions collapse for lack of cash. That was Fugger's world, and in many ways it is still ours. So when we call him the Renaissance banker who made Elon Musk look poor, what we really mean is this. Jacob Fugger reached a level of wealth where money stopped being about comfort and started being about architecture. He was helping build the political and financial architecture of Europe itself. He did not launch rockets, he launched emperors, and that is a very different kind of rich.